Anyway, Bruno surprises me, and probably a lot of you as well, and he puts in the check raise. Now, when you check raise here, what are you trying to accomplish? Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we have a hand from the 2020 World Series of Poker main event online. This is from the European, we call it the European, it's the basically non-American final table that took place in the Czech Republic at King's Casino. They are down to 5 players playing live. The vast majority of this tournament was played online, but the final table of both the American and the non-American games were played live in person. And here we have the final 5 from the non-American online sites. This was played on GG Poker, but we are again live in person. Here we have Damian Salas, very, very strong player. He, spoiler alert, did pretty well in this tournament. He raises it up with King 10 offsuit, which, I think it's fine. Notice here that him and Bruno Botillon, I think that's how you say his name, in the big blind, these are the 2 big stacks. The other players are all relatively shallow. You do have to worry about getting jammed on by Marco or Ramon here if you raise it up. So, you can go either way with the King 10. I would probably raise it the vast majority of the time, though. So, Damian raises it up, folds around to Bruno, who calls. So, just a bit of background information about the players. Salas is a very, very strong player. He has final tabled the World Series of Poker main event in Vegas, so very, very good result there. He final tabled this one as well. So, strong player. He doesn't really play in many of the super high roller tournaments or anything like that, but seems to be a very good, solid poker player. Bruno here, though, is actually a world-class player who's broken onto the scene over the last few years. I think he took 2nd place in the Heads Up event at the World Series of Poker last year for 600-something thousand bucks, I believe. He also, I think, final tabled the Players' Championship, another big buy-in tournament. And he's been playing like 25Ks and stuff, so good, strong, high roller player. And here he is at the final table. So he calls with the 9-7 of clubs, which is definitely a fine play. You don't really want to be 3-betting against the only other giant stack at the table. So his only option in this situation is to call. Flop comes 9, 6, 5. Bruno checks. This is a spot where Bruno's probably going to check the majority of his range. And it's over to Damian Salas. Ask yourself, what would I do if I was in Damian's shoes here? Take a second and think about it, because I'm not sure if you're supposed to continuation bet or not. You know what I want you to do? Type in the comment section. If you would check, if you would bet small, let's say 500K, if you bet medium, let's say $1 million, or if you bet big, let's say 1.5 million. So pause the video and type it in the comment section what you would do in this spot. I'll wait a second for you. Go ahead, do it. All right, did you do it? Good. This is a spot where you always want to ask yourself, what would I do in this situation? What are the world-class pros doing? What does the GTO solver say to do? And going through and asking yourself and quizzing yourself what you do in these situations will go a long way to helping you improve your poker skills. Also, I have a bunch of tournament tips available for you. Check that out at pokercoaching.com/tournament tips. It's completely free. That will give you lots and lots of actionable advice, things you should be thinking about, things you should be working to improve on that will help you crush tournaments. All right, in this scenario, I think Damian should probably just check behind. And you may say, do you really want to check with just king high? And I think you probably do. Whenever we are playing in this scenario, both these players have pretty deep stacks and they don't really want to play a big pot against each other. And this is a spot where it's very, very easy for Bruno to have connected with his board. And you also really don't want to get check raised. I mean, if you get check raised, you can easily fold, of course. But I think the player just let it go check, check, and probably lose his hand. And that is what Salas does. I like this play a lot. I think it's good. Turn is the 10 of hearts. It's a very, very bad card for Bruno because he had top pair on the flop. Now he doesn't. If you think about Damian's check back range on the flop, it's probably just going to be a lot of overcards. And the 10 definitely connects with the overcards. Now it's pretty easy for Salas to have ace 10, king 10, queen 10, jack 10. He could also have queen jack, which is a straight draw. King, queen, king, jack, those are straight draws. This is a spot where Salas's range is going to improve a ton on the turn. So for that reason, Bruno should not bet. He should just check and play his hand like a marginal made hand, I think. But he does take the aggressive line, which is interesting to me because when you bet here, Salas is either going to call or raise the vast majority of the time, I think. And when Salas does fold, what is he going to be folding here? He's going to be folding out maybe like ace king and ace queen would find a fold, and ace jack. But all of the other hands that I listed are definitely going to continue. Damien could also be slow playing the flop with a hand like aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens, because he doesn't want to get check raised in this scenario, again, because of the 3 much shorter stacks at the table. I think both these players are incentivized to be a little bit cautious. And when you're incentivized to be a little bit cautious, I definitely think you want to be, well, cautious with your very clear marginal made hands. That said, Bruno has made it clear from his play in this tournament and previous tournaments that he is not afraid to get in there and battle hard. He battles harder than most. And this is an example of this. And I think this might be a little bit aggressive. Certainly could be the right play. If you look at this GTO solver, very often it does like applying pressure with pairs plus gut shots. These are hands that are highly valued by the GTO solver. But I think you're really just incentivized to be kind of tight here. And when you go with third pot, you're also not really pricing out the overcards. Like king jack just isn't folding, and it's not really making much of an error, right? Anyway, Damien does just call. This is a spot where it's very easy for Bruno to have a straight, 2-pair, etc. And if he is bluffing, he has some outs, but who knows what they are. I like the call in this scenario. If you raise and get action, you're usually pretty unhappy. But if you call and keep your opponent in with their entire range, they're going to have a lot of marginal hands that are either going to check call the river or maybe inclined to bluff the river. River is a 4 of diamonds, pretty much a blank. Bruno checks, and now Damien has to decide if he wants to go for value. And I'm always a little bit uneasy going here for value, but if you know your opponent is the type of player who does get in there and does battle and will make big hero calls, I definitely think betting is viable. If your opponent is a very weak, tight, passive player, as some players will be, I think it's probably okay just to let it go check, because if you bet and get called or raised, you're not in great shape. But against a battling player like Bruno, I definitely think you want to go for a bet. And the reason I like a bet here is because if you do have king, queen, king, jack, or queen, jack, you would love to bluff those hands, right? And if you think about your value range that you want to value bet here, you don't always have aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens. You don't always have, like ace 10 or queen 10. You bet those on the flop, all of those hands, some portion of the time. So there's not a ton of value hands in your range. And given there's not a ton of value hands, but there are a decent amount of potential bluffs, you really do want to just use all of your reasonable value hands in this scenario. And that's probably going to be just any 10 or better. Like even jack 10 probably value bets here, or 10-8 suited if you happen to let that go check. So I think you do need to go for a bet against a strong player here. And that is what Damien does. He uses a pretty big size, which allows him to use as many bluffs as he possibly can, or at least a decent number of bluffs. And then in Bruno's shoes, this is another spot where I would have played this hand differently. I think I would have just called. It's not a great spot, but you have a very clear marginal made hand, and you beat the bluffs, right? You beat king, queen, king, jack, queen, jack, which all would very likely bluff. There's a chance that Damien has a hand like ace 8 or ace 7 that would also consider bluffing. He could also have a hand like 7-6 suited that decides to bluff, right? It's an interesting spot where I do think you beat a lot of bluffs. And when you beat a lot of bluffs, usually you just want to call. Or fold if you think your opponent's never bluffing, but clearly Salas is a good battling player too. Anyway, Bruno surprises me, and probably a lot of you as well. And he puts in the check raise. Now, when you check raise here, what are you trying to accomplish? Well, you are trying to get your opponent to fold out a better hand, right? So what better hands will fold here? Do we think Salas is going to fold a 10? I mean, maybe. The problem Bruno has here is that he is known to be someone who gets in there and mixes it up. And if you're known as someone who gets in there and mixes it up, your opponents should be inclined to make hero calls against you in general. If you're known to be a weak, tight, passive player, then I actually like this raise a lot, because people with a 10, or maybe even an overpair, will find a fold. But if your opponent knows that you like to battle, they are highly incentivized to call you here. I mean, just think of the pot odds, right? Salas has to put in, 3.5 million to win a pot that's going to go up to about 11, right? No, 12. So he needs to be good 28-ish% of the time, something like that. Let's call it 30%. It's hard to not be good 30% of the time if your opponent is a battling player. Also notice Bruno could be check raising here with a hand like King Jack. Maybe he has a hand like Ace 8 or Ace 7. Those hands make some sense to check raise. If it goes check check, sometimes your King Queen / King Jack wins. Sometimes your Ace 7 wins, but whenever you check and your opponent bets, you should at least consider raising with those. But Bruno does go for it with a middle pair. I'm interested to... I would love to learn why he chose this exact hand. I mean, maybe he thought Damien just always had a one-pair type hand or mostly one-pair type hands, and he thought he would fold almost all of them to a raise. And if that is true, then I love the raise, because when you call here in Bruno's shoes, you lose all of his marginal value hands, like a 10. But if you can make the vast majority of those fold with a raise, then this play becomes really, really sweet. Now, if I was to try to run the bluff here, I think I would have recommended Bruno just go all in. I know it's a big size, but at least then you are putting maximum pressure on your opponent. Whenever you go for this smaller size, if Damien calls, he still is going to have, 6 million chips left or something like that? And with 6 million chips left, he's not in great shape, but notice he's still in the middle of the pack and fine. Whereas if you go all in and he calls and loses, he's out of the tournament, or at least very close to out of the tournament. And clearly that's not where he wants to be. So I think if you are going to bluff here, I think the right play is to go all in. That said, I do think I probably would have just called. Whenever you're medium stack against medium stack, you are highly incentivized to be cautious. And I think this is a spot where both players just have a decently strong but marginal hand, and I think that should have resulted in a more passive line from Bruno here. Anyway, around to Damien. Damien's paying attention. He knows Bruno likes to battle. If you know Bruno likes to battle, don't fold top pair, even though you're going to be beat sometimes. And Damien calls and collects a nice pot, which propelled him to a very, very deep run in this tournament. I don't want to spoil it for anyone if you haven't seen it. So that's going to be it for today. I want to thank PokerNews.com for posting this video. Again, if you want to check out my tournament tips, I have a sheet for you. Check that out at pokercoaching.com/tournament tips. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Have a great, great week. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you. Good luck in the games. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.